Hi, fellow tea lovers. Settle in.
The word is about. There's something evolving.
I'm Nell.
And I'm Rose.
Whatever may come, the world keeps revolving.
We've got a story.
They say the next big thing is here, that the revolution's near. But to me it seems quite clear that it's all just a little bit of history repeated.
We're bringing you the tea.
Across era.
Yes, I've seen it before. Just little bits of history repeated.
Welcome back. Okay, today's story, you can probably tell by the title, not you, Rose, because I haven't told you the title yet.
So I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but we take turns telling stories.
Yeah.
And we don't generally tell each other what we're going to be talking about beforehand, because really the whole point of the podcast when we set out to do this was to recreate those impromptu, awesome conversations that we very much enjoyed having.
And that's why at the end of a lot of things, I'm all, wait, but what about?
Same.
So today's story is going to be a little bit different than what we usually do. What I'm going to tell you about, it's not our usual like history relating to pop culture or things happening now, are just cyclical of things that have already happened. But you'll see that this is something that's been going on forever. But first, I do need to give a trigger warning. In today's episode, we are going to talk about murder, intimate partner aggression and violence, maybe the Epstein files, and other subjects that could be triggering for some people. If this is not your episode, we understand, and we will see you next time.
We just finished watching the first season of a show called Riot Women.
Yes, we did. It's really good.
Intensely amazing. If you can find it, watch it immediately. It really made me think about trigger warnings because they have one, and they mean it.
I mean it very much.
Did not actually realize how intense we were getting, but it was worth it, and it was absolutely necessary for the story. But
yeah,
it was just like, wow, guys, that was
many of the 6 episodes.
Yeah,
had quite a bit of stuff going on in them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is kind of old news by now, but it's still fun. The Super Bowl halftime show was really fun and cute, and Benito is, he's handsome.
He's got normal handsome men features that are, kind of not necessarily like striking in any particular way.
Take away the really the swagger,
the attitude,
that's what is
the
attitude,
hottest thing.
the clothes, yeah. And I think that's proof that you don't have to get obsessed with your outer looks. I mean, personality, it just goes so far.
That's the takeaway. It's not just like, oh, I should act like a dick and that's, what's attractive. No, that's not the point of that statement.
If you're nobody likes me because I'm not tall enough.
Right. Your attitude is your confidence, not the attitude that you treat people with.
Don't be mean.
That's distinction.
That's the worst. That reminds me, I don't really want to go into this, but there's more details coming out. It's about a true crime case. I don't even want to say the guy's name because I think he's in my opinion, he is a dirty incel who doesn't deserve to be remembered. But his name rhymes with crying slow burgers. There's just more details that have been coming out, which is I don't watch the news at all ever. It's really rough right now, right?
Yeah, and I do have to point out that that's a current state of affairs. That's not we bonded over enjoying current affairs back in the day, and current affairs are just the worst timeline. I
know, it's such a bad timeline. I'm so I'll tell you guys something, all 5 of you of my friends out there. So I am one of those people, I'm everyone should definitely seek therapy if that's what they want, or a lot of times even if that's what they don't want. Except for me.
Obviously, I'm fine.
But everything, and not just the state of the world, because even though I choose actively not to seek the news, I listen to podcasts. I hear what's going on. But what I'm saying is, don't think that people owe you anything. Come on. Which brings me to my next point, which is not fun like Bad Bunny, but Epstein files. Can't escape that either. The dude had a ranch in this state.
I did not know that until I started reading.
Either.
I think it was on Albuquerque Reddit. That's the scary thing about how overwhelming the news is right now, is because it's tailor-made to make you miss things.
Right.
Like a giant ranch in your basically backyard
That's the thing,
owned by a
right?
pedophile.
Yeah, they don't want you to look at the Epstein files, so let's have ice in Minnesota or whatever.
Let's demand Greenland. Let's do anything and everything that makes you look the other way.
Right. And this is what really grinds my gears, as they say. There's some lady who's like the founder of the Dubin, I think that's her last name, breast center at the Tisch Cancer Institute at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. And she used to date Epstein. And she sent him
Seriously?
an email that said, "Come and visit next week. Selena will have 5 friends over." Selena would be her daughter, and she's also a doctor, according to the Dubin Family Trust website. And so hopefully she nor her friends were ever molested, and I hope she's not like her mom.
The range of people with actual involvement it's insane. And
that person saying if we prosecuted everyone, like our infrastructure would fall apart, and that does suck, but sometimes it needs to happen.
you know what? I would prefer...
I don't really want it to happen. I want them to get prosecuted and put away forever, and we like literally can replace them because nobody's really that valuable individually.
We need to have a system where we are not reliant on people that will take advantage like this. And if taking that part of the system out breaks the system, then we needed a new one.
Right. Okay, guys, I'm sorry. Now, when I get into my story today, I feel like everyone's going to know why I have this feeling going on. It's not just because there's like a Friday the 13th this week. I chose to do this story now because of the date I'm about to tell y'all. So, my cousin, Kathy Joan Lawson, was born February 4th, 1975, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to parents Joyce and Ernie Sr., because she had one older brother at that time, making the dad a senior, obviously. If you look her up online, she also might be listed as like Kathy Lawson Arredondo, Kathy Joan Arredondo, because she was married. After her mom remarried, she gained a younger sister who is a cousin my age. I have this big family with, tons of cousins.
Me too.
And it's great having like, the core group of cousins your age. And also a big group of step siblings when her mom remarried. And in my family, if you marry in or join in or you just end up with us for whatever reason, you're part of our family, right? And we used to have these like enormous like Thanksgivings at my grandparents' house. There'd be like 50 people, all like a dozen and a half cousins who you only saw at that time of year. And you're like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Gosh, you're older and you have a kid now. Wild. So that's the kind of family I had. There was always anywhere from like 1 to 12 cousins to hang out with all the time.
Nice.
Yeah, it was fun. Like the babysit in that song he has with Chance the Rapper. Everybody's my cousin. So, and when Kathy, I have this memory of Kathy when she was about like 14 or 15, her bedroom was next to my other cousin's bedroom. And sometimes we would like, peek in there because she was cool. She was older.
I want to be around the cool older cousins.
I know.
They know things.
We were really allowed in there. And we definitely weren't allowed in the boys' room. They had converted the garage into like one giant bedroom. And that was where all the boys were. There's a lot of boys. The only thing I remember from it, one of them had the poster on the wall that was very popular, I think, in the 80s, of like an egg. And it said, "This is your brain." And then an egg in a frying pan. And it said,
brain on drugs.
And then I'm sure there's probably like some other like smart aleck quip after that.
You know what? I feel like that's right, but
I don't remember what it was. But in Kathy's room, she had like those really shiny like 8x10s that you pull out of the magazines. Like, I don't know what they were called at that time. I remember like Bop and Tiger Beat and stuff. And, it would just be like cheesy posed photos with like a quiz like, which primetime teen heartthrob is your soulmate? Things like that. But at that point in time, hers were like Axl Rose and like CeCe DeVille from Poison. I really remember those because like Guns N' Roses was so cool. And I had a crush on CeCe DeVille. Guys, I was in elementary school.
Hey, we don't judge each other for our younger crushes.
Pants. But stuff like that. One thing that sticks out in my memory, my cousin and I had snuck in there one time, And then we heard her coming down the hall, so we hid in the closet. And of course, in the closet is this thing which I found horrifying at the time, like a giant green round toy box, but the top is like a molded Hulk Hogan. No. The Hulk, the green guy. Hulk Hogan would have been far scarier. No, the Hulk, the green guy. And he's making that face, I hated it. But while we were hiding in there, and I don't remember if we got caught in there or not, but her and I guess her boyfriend were smooching. I know, so funny. Sorry, guys. Telling on us. Poor thing. I remember I was riding on the handlebars of her bicycle when we were little because, your parents, if you're like mine, you could play outside. There's all the older kids are out there. It's probably safe enough.
You're pretty supervised.
And you were like allowed to play on the sidewalk between like this house that you were at and like 4 houses down or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened that a couple houses down lived like the mom of someone who had married into one of the stepbrothers.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so yeah.
You got people watching out.
So I'm riding on poor Kathy's handlebars on her bike, and I think she hit a rock or something in the driveway.
Oh, no.
I know. I don't remember like how I fell or where I hit. I do remember like running down the street crying and poor Kathy after me. I'm sorry. I mean, it wasn't her fault. It's an accident. That's why they're called accidents.
I had one of those where with a go-kart some neighbor's dad had made, and I went over and she's like, yeah, we're allowed to use it. And we go flying down the street, and I realized pretty quickly we're about to just hit disaster. And so like I stuck my foot out to try and slow us down, and of course it got sucked up into the wheel, and so she had to go run get her dad and everything. And
oh my goodness,
they were mad at me for that, like because I was the older person, the older kid, and so it was clearly my idea. I was like so offended forever.
Right? How rude. I just remember like we had a church retreat at the end of July, and on top of my shoulder I had like just skinned it really bad, and it was like one of those gross flat oozy
Yeah.
One of the funniest memories, she was probably 15 or 16, and she was babysitting me and my 2 siblings. I'm the oldest, and she would call the radio station for me and request Salt and Pepper songs, including Let's Talk About Sex. And in elementary school, like it's like maybe a vibe that you're not supposed to know about yet.
This is naughty, but I don't know why.
But you have no idea why. And the song is, it's jamming. But, there's a lot of, I see like videos out right now, and it's like 13-year-old me jamming out to the lyrics of, I don't know, a song about prostitution, not having any idea. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
So the last time I saw Kathy was 2010. I was working from home at that time for a financial institution. It was awful. Technology for working at home wasn't quite as good.
It was leaps and bounds even from the first time I ever worked at home.
Yeah.
Much later.
Right. So I was having some issues. Anyways, I'm working from home, and the doorbell rings, and I go see who it is, and it's Kathy. And it was a Sunday morning, so I think she forgot that like my mom and my grandparents would all be away in church.
Mm-hmm.
So she stops by. So we hang out and chat, and she told me something, it's risque, but it made me laugh, and it was about why her and someone she had been dating like had fallen out, and she was just like, I don't like giving BJs.
Reasonable.
Right? That also reminds me of that thing in Riot Women, which I'm not going to go into detail describing, but when she tells the guy, and by the time you're my age, you just like say no to things you don't actually like.
Weird.
Right? I know. But yeah, we just talked about lives in general, and she had told me, and I knew the story, but I hadn't seen her in person, that she had gotten like a bump on her nose and thought it was a pimple for months. Of course, it turned out to be skin cancer.
Oh.
Right? And so she had a little scar, and like a long strip of skin had been removed, but like it wasn't that bad. Better than cancer, guys.
Yeah.
Speaking of cancer, R.I.P. James Vanderbeek,
Oh.
Catherine O'Hare,
Gosh.
everyone, where are you guys going? Go get that checked. Stay on top of your bowel cancer. It is like the new killer.
No, colon cancer is killing millennials. I keep reading it.
Yeah, I know. It's scary. It's annoying. It's inconvenient. The stuff you have to drink is literally the worst. But they do have that one you always see on the TV. This is not sponsored by, this is not an ad, like Cologuard or something. If you have insurance, see if they'll pay for it. Do it from the privacy of your own home. Yeah, anyways, just like go take care of that. Don't let the cancer win. So Kathy had been living in Clovis, New Mexico at that time. She had gotten married a while before, and they had moved down there. It's pretty on the border with Texas. It's a very small area. And I mean, I've never lived there, but what I associate with it, unfortunately, is like a while back, some kid went and shot up the library there. And then a lady actually went to high school with, her son was killed by a kid while he was out there visiting. And it was an underage kid, so I have no idea if he had any consequences for that.
Yeah.
And look, when I said earlier that I don't read the news, I like lately once a day, because the traffic here has been nuts. Like, guys, we don't have like big city style traffic all the time.
We live in the city, and it ain't a city.
There's been like a car fire a day. There's been the guy who was driving down the wrong side of the freeway, who I missed by apparently 10 minutes, thank goodness.
I know.
And people got stuck on the freeway. Yeah, the
that
semi.
had to back up off of one of the entrances.
It's been wild.
Week for a
So
while.
I do check this local news source called Albuquerque Raw, ABQ Raw. Also not an ad. They're wild. They're ex-cops. They show up everywhere and document it, but they always have the news of like something big like that. Anywho, yeah, that's what I associate with Clovis. And my point was, especially if you just look at ABQ Raw, you're like, I can't believe people live in Albuquerque. It must be the most dangerous place in the world. Well, it's not, first of all. There's many, many cities ahead of us, and at least 4 of them are also in the USA. So there. So anyways, so she had gotten divorced. She was still living down there. I believe some of her family members from her dad's side of the family still lived down there. I'm not positive on that. But I think at that time, possibly her ex-husband or some of her kids, she has 3 kids, still lived in Clovis. And then the following year, Kathy would move from Clovis to Houston, Texas. So the next part I'm going to read you is directly from the NAMUS website, which NAMUS, which is the Federal Missing Persons Database managed by the U.S. Department of Justice. Probably not trustworthy anymore, but this is
what you got.
Yeah, here we are. Anyways, she had met a man in Clovis that was from Houston, and over the next year, they got to know each other through the internet and texting and talking over the next year. That says that twice. He asked her to move to Houston with him. From what we understand, the relationship had its ups and downs with some arguing. On February 11th, 2012, Kathy and her boyfriend/fiance had gotten into an argument. He disabled her vehicle so she could not leave the house and then left the house. Kathy and her 18-year-old daughter left the house walking and returned home after some shopping and getting something to eat. Kathy's daughter said Kathy had texted the fiance to tell him she was leaving him and getting a place for her and her daughter as soon as she could during the time while they were out shopping. Do not know what his response was to this reevaluation. After returning home, Kathy began watching TV. At some point, Kathy and her daughter saw him return and go to a friend's house across the street but did not talk to him. Kathy later went to sleep in the daughter's room on a sofa in the room. The daughter last saw Kathy asleep on the sofa in pink ER pajamas, a white t-shirt, and this was at 10:30 p.m. When the daughter woke up the next morning around 7 a.m., she asked the fiancé where her mom was. He said he'd gotten in at 5 a.m. and assumed Kathy was in the room asleep. The daughter began looking and realized the only thing gone were her mom's keys, cell phone, and cigarettes. Kathy's ID, ATM card, wallet, clothes, makeup, and all other possessions, including her daughter, remained at home with the exception of the above-mentioned items, and it was later realized that the engagement ring, necklace, and another ring the fiancé had bought her that she was wearing before she went to sleep, as well as white shoes and a black jacket she'd been wearing before she went to sleep, were also gone. So that's what it says on there, and well, that's no longer accurate. She's not missing anymore. If you listen to or watch or whatever, even like a smidge of true crime, you know that most of the time they go hard on the significant other, because most of the time, statistically, not allegedly in this case, that's happens,
Yeah.
you know. And then this man's name is not listed on the website, but it's not a secret. You can find it in a million other places. So she was engaged to a man named Stephen Todd. That's also a very generic name. And I think he's scrubbed himself from the internet, so you probably won't find him. And there's no proof that he did anything wrong anyways, because when someone goes missing, most of the time they reappear or get found fairly quickly. And when an adult in sound mind goes missing, they're allowed to.
Right.
Right.
It's jarring, but it's not
right. It could be totally out of
necessarily a
character.
crime.
Right? It can be completely out of character, but they're still allowed to do it. It sucks. There's one in, I don't know, 1,000 cases where, 50 years later, the person was like, yeah, I gave up that life and, left. Not usually, but it just happens. And also, if you listen to true crime, you also know, though, back to the significant other, that there are plenty of cases where you're going along and you're like, it was totally the wife. I definitely know it was her. I can see it. And then you find out that it was just random, mistaken identity or something. And every clue made it look like it was the person, the closest person to them. And also, at the time Kathy went missing, there was not a crime scene.
Right.
Right? There's not blood splatter. There's not an emergency text message. There's not, I don't know,
it's just nothing.
Chunks of hair. There's no reason for them to ask for the security camera that was supposedly recording in the house the whole time, So, did you know on average 600,000 people a year go missing in the USA?
Wow.
But 98% of them, and I have that stat somewhere in here, I'll get to it, are found or resolved. Or, I mean, not always how you would hope, but
found, I think, probably sounds more optimistic than it always is.
Right. And I'm sure many people are familiar with the different types of alerts. You've got Amber Alerts, which was named after a child who was stolen and kidnapped and information wasn't put out quick enough about her. There's Silver Alerts for older people. There's different types of alerts, and they, have different criteria for them. But yeah, what do you do when someone just disappears?
Yeah.
No body, no crime. So, I pulled this graph. I'll read it to you guys. And this, I think, was from 2025 in Texas. I picked Texas because she was in Houston when she went missing. So, at this point in time, there were 2,866 open missing persons cases, 2,059 open unidentified persons cases, and 2,329 open unclaimed persons cases. So obviously those could be in the same group as the first two. That's a lot. But of the resolved cases, they've got 4,398 resolved missing persons cases overall, but far less unidentified, about half of the number of open unidentified missing person cases they've resolved. And then unclaimed persons, only 374.
No.
That's sad. If you've never had someone just disappear out of your life, you're very lucky. I would never wish that on anyone. I can't even imagine my poor aunt and uncle, her sister, her brothers, her kids.
You didn't miss her less because you were just a cousin. There's no just in there.
And then, because there's nothing at all, especially if they're, again, like I said, just, quote, missing. What ends up happening, probably for everyone, I don't think I'm unique in this way, you end up having so many dreams about them because that's consuming your thoughts.
It's
and
what
you're
your brain is processing.
Right. You dream that you saw her in Vegas and this bathroom on the strip and she was in a wheelchair and she'd been sex trafficked, but at least I knew she wasn't dead. Right. I mean, that's a terrible dream. Then you dream that she's dead. And then you dream that, you found out later she chose to leave and not tell anyone. And then her parents, this one, I think they can't ever move. They can't ever change your phone number.
Just
because if it's that, less than 1% chance that she has amnesia and one day she just remembers the address or phone number, you have to still be there.
Right.
Oh my gosh. And then I'm sure you just sit there and you're like, was I, every time I was ever mean or hard on her growing up when really, what teenagers are like, We probably all deserved more than we got.
We all search for things to blame in
Right.
the face of just awful.
Right. And then, I mean, online, the internet's full of armchair detectives. I wouldn't call myself that, but I do
You're an
sometimes look things up.
armchair
Right. I'm like,
detective. You're like a love seat detective.
yeah.
Oh no, wait, that sounds dirty.
Well, I'm love seating while watching an armchair detective and just thinking about what they're saying.
There you go.
Like with Kathy, there's a good number of people who are like, why isn't she considered to be a victim of Israel Keys? Which, I mean, honestly, if you don't know who that is, again, you're lucky. He was a serial killer from Alaska. He had these buckets, like go buckets, that he would like bury in places around the country, and some of them could be there for years. And
Wow.
then,
I've
I
never
mean,
heard
what
of
do you do? Do you decide one day you're like, I remember I buried that one in Massachusetts, so I'm going to go hang out at near the trailhead where it is for a few days and decide who to pick off? Yeah, this is not a podcast about him. There's plenty about him. Crime junkie, morbid. I'm sure there's plenty.
But I think it is very like tempting to shoehorn a mystery into, oh, well, it must have been
Well, even
this equally mysterious thing.
my high school best friend, the one I go see in Alabama, I mean, she kind of looked into that theory too. And there are some things that line up and some things I don't really know if they line up. Yeah, it's pretty wild. And then, of course, in the immediate aftermath, everybody's panicking and like a Facebook page gets made because, that's how it goes. And I was rolling back through it while, remembering stuff for this episode. And way back when, there's a lot of stuff about like people being like, why hasn't her daughter told us what happened? She was there. What does she know? And I'm like, first of all,
She was a child.
she was a child. She was 18 years old. Her mom freaking disappeared after a fight with her fiance, whose house she's in and wakes up alone with him in. Fam.
She is also a victim in this scenario.
She is. And he disabled her car. Like, that immediately is scary. The Facebook page, it's public. It's called Remembering Kathy Lawson Arredondo. And the reason I bring up the Facebook page is because I wanted to point out this. I mentioned that like the fiance seemed to be scrubbed off the internet. So the posts and comments he made, back in the first little while, they're gone. I feel like they went down pretty quickly, which, what do I know? If I was in that situation, I'd probably take him down too, especially if I was innocent. But there were comments he made like, Kathy's going to be in so much trouble when she gets home. Like insinuating maybe she'd left him for another guy. Like leaves her kid there for another guy? Sir.
No.
Clearly, as we mentioned earlier, there are people who probably would.
But you know her.
Right? The next thing I'm going to tell you is alleged. So you can't sue me because it's alleged. It's things that I found on the internet that are attributed to like Reddit and a Facebook page, okay? Do your own research, as they say. Like I mentioned, supposedly that house had a security system. But like I said, what are they going to do about it? If there's no crime scene, you can't demand, you can't get a warrant to make someone give you tapes when there's no reason to have a warrant, even though everyone's like, that's really suspicious. So you can't be too mad about that. And according to the FBI, the average clearance rate for missing people is 99.87%. There's like three main reasons they say that clearances have. The first,
clearing out the case.
Law enforcement located the subject, and that could be even like if you call and you're like, they came home. They're supposed to verify that. So they located the subject. The individual returned and, let the authorities know on their own. Or number three, which this one I find potentially problematic, the agency that entered the information removed the record after deeming it invalid.
Like I can see leaving legal space for like duplicates and things like that, but that's a big hole.
And again, I listen to buckets of true crime. I will fall asleep watching 48 Hours or Forensic Files, But, again, maybe I'm jaded, but a lot of times I feel like there's things and cases when they finally get solved, like cold cases that get solved, they weren't really overlooked. They weren't like invalid. They were overlooked. Or like
just hadn't paid
someone didn't double check the information. Obviously, number one being, and number two being they were found pretty much alive and well is great for that stat. Like every day in America, people file reports on an average of 1,740 missing Americans, although that does include adults.
Mm-hmm.
And it also does not account for U.S. citizens who have vanished into other countries because perhaps they didn't get reported missing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't account for other people who aren't reported missing, period. Maybe they, they're unhoused or their lifestyle has led them to be more away from people who would notice if they were missing.
Right.
About 70% of reported missing people are found voluntarily or return within 72 hours. And then not all individuals who are originally listed as missing stay on the missing list because, they might be kidnapped, murdered, some other criminal act. But each of the 99.87 clearance rate accounts for someone who is reported missing. Anyways, I could speculate on this forever because, when this happened, I discovered the show, I think it's on Investigation Discovery, disappeared. And it's just episodes about people who went missing. In maybe one episode per season, someone is found. And of those, I think one person was found alive and intentionally missing. So, yeah. No wonder you have those dreams.
It's kind of like Unsolved Mysteries back in the day, though. Like we had a lot fewer routes for just
Unsolved
putting
Mysteries,
eyes on things.
Side note, also served as a bit of like a Facebook now because they had those like the angel who helped me on the side of the road misconnection kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Occasionally they'd read those.
Honestly, you want to feel a little bit better about the world, watch very old episodes of Unsolved Mysteries because they've started tacking on resolutions.
Oh, I know. I
It's a
love
lot less
those.
stressful, actually.
I know, because one thing I don't know what this says about me, but one thing I find with like crime stories is when they're resolved, a lot of times as the person on the outside of the family's trauma and pain, I'm like, well, there's justice as much as there can be.
Right.
Right. All right. So I do know on Friday, December 30th, 2022, around 3 p.m., I got a text from my cousin, the younger sister of Kathy, and she texted me to see if I was still with her mom. Unfortunately, I did not see the text when it came through because we were at, or maybe it was over by then, but we were at my great aunt's funeral that day. And we went to Sadie's Mexican restaurant. It's not open there anymore, to eat after the funeral. And so, yeah, I didn't see the text.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, she had texted and was like, oh, are you with my mom? Because she's not answering her phone. Well, my cousin I think they had just gotten home from a vacation, and she had realized while on vacation, and they might have been on a cruise, so you don't have great phone service.
Right.
She got a voicemail from the detective, and it was like, call me, I have an update. And I mean, we haven't had an update in 10 years. And so she knew it wasn't going to be like the joyous one. But it turned out that the person who was a detective, while she was a missing person, had been promoted or moved or whatever to homicide. And he is the detective now. And he called to let her know that a body several months before had been found near the a bit of Houston, and it's like, and it actually was like some and DNA had finally come back, and it was Kathy. I believe this is alleged, I guess, not confirmed. Maybe there's that they were able to detect because it has been classified as a homicide.
Mm-hmm.
And that came to me from the detective because I was like, hello, don't forget about us. Because back to my true crime obsession. Thank you, Crime Junkie and Morbid and Annie Elise and literally everyone else. Like, the people who make the most noise, what's that saying? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. You just keep on, right?
Right.
So the detective, he told me that from where Kathy was living to the it's between two heavily traveled thoroughfares. And if you've ever driven in Texas in the cities, everything's a toll road. It does not mean there's less traffic. Look, I don't like giving Texas any sort of credit, period. But their concrete roads, don't come at me. I've heard they're bad for the environment. But they're a joyous driving experience. And that's why they all drive 95 on a regular day. I'm not saying I want to drive 95. I
And then they move here and do it here, and that's where we get
drives under the speed limit. Yes, someone did that to me this morning, and I didn't even get mad. I was like, "Oh, Texas license plate." But those concrete roads are. Mwah. I also don't want to pay for my roads with any more than I already do, so that's why we have these. Anywho, so 2 heavily traveled thoroughfares, the on the north side, and then interstate / highway. The reason he was telling me about that is because I talked to him because Crime Junkie, they have a charitable arm called Season of Justice, and you can apply for a grant for a billboard. Billboards are very expensive.
Billboards
The
are very
lady
effective.
who took out the 3 billboards in Ebbing, Missouri, I think that movie based on a true story was called, they're very expensive.
Yeah.
So they do grants for billboards. And if my grant gets funded, we want to place a billboard on that route. And it would just, be a picture of Kathy because, as I found out and probably knew but didn't think about, nor did I plan on this when I was getting quotes for prices on billboards, you can't be like, hey, insert name here, why did you kill Kathy? You can't do that. So
Tempting, but yeah.
we talked about it, and it would be like a single picture of Kathy and just like giant. It would be the same name of this podcast episode, which is Who Killed Kathy. And then it would have the number for Crime Stoppers because Crime Stoppers is anonymous. And that way, whoever is still living in that house would have to drive by that billboard. But also, any friends who've ever driven to that house, the fiance was with on that day maybe, would see it. And
Anybody
maybe
that served them coffee that day,
right?
Maybe saw something that could
It could
add
be
to the picture.
anything.
Yeah, no,
right?
Putting eyes on it is the point. Just like the Unsolved Mysteries, just like Facebook, but
Right.
directly where she was.
Right. And the detective, he's working on a theory, and he said this is just a theory with absolutely no proof that he was going to tell me about anyways. I added that, pardon. That he thinks that the suspect in Kathy's homicide drove west on the tollway, which leads to which I assume are areas west of Houston, but that leads to the and then unfortunately, but only unfortunately in this specific situation, not in the doorbell camera Super Bowl commercial kind of way, massive state surveillance was not easily accessible or long-term or kept. I do not believe they had toll tags at that time that you could just quickly drive through and it would scan you and you never even had to brake.
If they did, it was still a luxury thing.
Yeah. So I would assume there's not really any record of who drove through there that night. And that's where we stand. That's it. But I listen to true crime. Do you guys know that? Have I said that enough?
Once, maybe.
If the detectives do have more, usually there's a reason they're not sharing it.
Right. It's not that
they're
anybody's
working.
suggesting that they're not doing their
Yeah,
job.
they're working on it. If there's things, they can't share it with us because it
That's also their
can
job.
compromise the investigation.
Yeah.
I don't say luckily. I believe that people, if you commit a crime, especially a terrible crime like that, like we live in a society that calls for crimes to be punished. And I mean, we have a justice system. We don't have the most just system in the world, but that's what we have. But, sometimes it doesn't happen. And so maybe that happens in the afterlife. As a Christian, I'm not supposed to hope that on anyone, though. It's very difficult, I must say.
I've probably quoted this a million times, and I don't remember who said it. But I do not wish for anyone's death, but I have read some obituaries with great glee.
Yes, that one. I like that one. I like that one. I don't think I could request any case files on this because it's an open investigation.
Right.
So you can't do the FOIA thing. And then, like I said, there's Israel Keys mentions. And then there were theories before her remains were found. There was someone's friend owned a junkyard where they compacted cars and, maybe that happened. And there was a podcast, I think it was called Murder Houston, but it was focused on murders in Houston. And they were speculating, only speculating, that from the area. They're well, what if your friend's house is across the street and, you go hang out and you sit in your garage and the door's open and, I don't know if he smoked, you sit in the garage and smoke and then you see Kathy come outside to smoke at night. I don't know if she smoked outside. I mean, a lot of people smoke outside and don't smoke in their houses, so maybe. And did they get in another argument? Like, I don't know.
Somebody saw something,
Right?
even not necessarily something that they've thought was relevant up to
Yes.
this point.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because not just in this case, but in some things you probably think to yourself, well, the police probably already know, like everyone's talking about it, so they probably know. They might not know.
Right. There's always that
maybe
one tip
nobody
that
told
tips something
them.
over.
Maybe you think they already know. Maybe you think it's actually not that important and unrelated. But maybe they have all the puzzle pieces except 3 in the middle, and you're holding them.
Yeah.
And you can be anonymous. You can call Crime Stoppers, Houston Crime Stoppers. You can go on their website. Their phone number is 713-222-8477. Please don't feel like you shouldn't call because it might not be important. In closing, as of this recording, Nancy Guthrie is still missing. And I mean, the coverage that some cases get, like, it definitely brings up feelings. But I wish every case could get that coverage.
The number of women of color and Native women in particular that
Yeah.
disappear and nothing is ever said about it is staggering.
It is. But if you've made it this far and you're like, what does this have to do with history? Well, in just the United States, 30% of women have experienced intimate partner violence. It's a story as old as time. I just finished this book. It was a really good book. It's like a jillion pages long. But like the main character says to the other protagonist, she's like, I think she might be quoting someone, why is it that every woman knows a woman who's been raped, but no man knows a rapist? Pam Bondi, you're not a girl's girl. Do not cut that. That's all I have to say about that. Women should support, it's not all I have to say about that. Women should support women. What in the ever-loving world? You're not a girl's girl, Pam. And that is the worst thing I can say about another woman. Don't forget to like and follow and subscribe. I'll be back with much more lighter and fluffy things. I really appreciate you guys listening.
Thank you guys for listening today. Sometimes the stories are the things that hit us the hardest, and that is the privilege of having access to the means of production, is getting to tell these stories. And also, I know I say this a whole lot more now, but I think it feels more relevant now. Be safe out there.
You should be safe out there. Thank you for listening.